So I think it goes without saying, and if you've watched any of my Pantheon videos over the last month or so, you'll probably notice that I have had a lot of fun playing a rework of my favourite champion in League. And as far as visuals go, well, yeah, I'm impressed and satisfied. Heavily satisfied. But that being said, there was something about Pantheon that wasn't sitting quite right with me. I mean, his win rate is having around the 45 to 47% in top lane win rate range, which may not sound good, but trust me, when you compare it to Akali, a champion rework that when they were released had a win rate that was in the 30% region, well, Pantheon ain't looking too bad compared to that. Here's the problem though. With the rework of Pantheon, there were a lot of bells and whistles added to his kit to make him look super cool and make his abilities look super cool, but when you do boil it down to the raw numbers, Pantheon needs a little bit of help from our big papa Riot. You see, old Pantheon was a very weird champion. He was basically top lane assassin, but in the midst of his rework, he got dropped into this weird purgatory between fighter and assassin, whereas he excelled at neither in the process. I've seen a lot of success with Pantheon in normal games. I think he's really fun to play, even if competitively he may not be balanced quite to where he should be, but I'm not quite comfortable dropping into ranked games with him just yet, but it'll come in time. So I decided to open a letter to Riot. I know feedback can be difficult to sift through to find a community's problem with the champion and target what exactly needs changing, so I decided to take on a way harder than I could have ever anticipated job of doing so, and making it as easy as possible to digest for both Riot themselves and for all of you. And I don't exactly want to start a petition to change Pantheon here, and I know that Riot are going to tweak him, and to be clear as well, this isn't a negative video. Let's be real, no champion is going to go very far without being tweaked so soon after release, and whilst it may seem like I'm just kind of focusing on all of the negatives of his abilities, trust me when I say I love Pantheon more than the average person, and everything I say in this video is entirely just because I want him to be in the healthiest state he can be. As for the whole petition thing, I'm not really going to go down that route to show Riot, hey, here's a massive group of angry people who want this. So to put a positive spin on this, if you agree with anything in this video, drop a like on the video to show your support. We'll consider that signing the petition. Also, this video took 2 full weeks of sifting through feedback and comments and just trying to boil down a lot of the feedback into a general consensus and something that is vaguely digestible. So hey, subscribe I guess, although to be honest, I'm not sure how much more kind of content like this I'm gonna do. It's not really very funny, it's actually somewhat educational, which is not known for, my channel is not known for that. Oh, but anyway, on to business. So this video, it's not just my opinion. Yes, I sprinkle a lot of my opinion in, like I'm Gordon Ramsay seasoning some lamb, like I'm the Michelin star chef of making hit opinion pieces on League of Legends. I went onto the Pantheon main subreddit and I was just honest with them. What's wrong with Pantheon so far? I gave a number of issues that I personally found with his kit, and even in my videos on Panth on the PBE that I did, if you've watched them, you probably saw that I gave a number of issues that I found with them. Some of those were fixed before we even hit the live servers, some of them have been fixed as of recently, which is awesome news, but just to make sure that I wasn't about to dabble in forces that I clearly did not really comprehend, because let's be real, I didn't exactly graduate from Harvard with a master's in balancing League of Legends gameplay. I needed to get a second opinion, but let's say, well, not just a second opinion, let's say like 6 second opinions, including the opinion of people like Keegan, who are challenger level Pantheon players. So to give this video some structure, let's go left to right, breaking down the building blocks that make up the numbers of the new most handsome champion in League of Legends. And as an added extra note, this video did, as I say, took 2 weeks to write and formulate. Some things have actually been fixed since the beginning of writing this, and credit will be given where credit is due for Riot listening and helping make Pantheon healthier as a champion to play. So Mortal Will is a cool little mechanic. Every 5 auto attacks or spells you drop, you get to put out an empowered basic ability, meaning that there's actually a decent amount of skill expression in this ability in the way you choose to order your abilities to make different combos happen. Diving, maybe set up your combos so that you can have a longer E to block more tower shots as you finish the kill with Ignite. Want to burst in lane, maybe stun the enemy on 4 stacks and drop the Q to get that easy big boy damage. Or proc immediate press the attack with an empowered auto on your W and get 3 immediate stacks of your passive straight back. Here's the issue though, Mortal Will has too many stacks. What you'll find happening is that if you go all in with an empowered W, it's cool that you get 3 immediate stacks of Mortal Will, However, you're left in this very awkward scenario where if you want to continue a rundown, you have to auto attack once more, which you can do straight after the 3 empowered autos, but you now either have to hit another auto attack, which Pantheon's auto attack speed isn't really that fantastic on a fleeing enemy, which totals up to 5 auto attacks getting your passive back, or alternatively, you pop another ability to get you up to 5, so you either have to use your spear shot, which is your Q, or your shield, leaving you with 2 awkward scenarios. If you Q, yeah, you have your Mortal Will back up, but you have no real way to output damage, because all you've got left is your shield, which, let's be honest, doesn't do the most damage in the world. Or you use your E, meaning you now have the damage, but you are leaving yourself incredibly open to a potential turnaround. What I found myself doing in lane mostly when I want to get that burst out is just getting to 4 Mortal Will stacks, stunning the enemy, Qing to get that empowered Q damage off, and then just backing away using E's insurance to make sure I completely win the trade. Now, I'm not ruling out the possibility that with 4 stacks as Mortal Will, this would make Pantheon completely unmatchable in trades, but to me there just seems like this really awkward moment or two of downtime between you getting your empowered W off and then actually being able to output any of the damage you really wanted to get out when you dove on the enemy laner to begin with. Especially in teamfights where CC is being thrown around, with a little bit of soft CC and maybe some slows on Pantheon, it basically leaves him helpless to do nothing but play defensive after that initial W or run the risk of being just kited and burst. Failing a stack reduction, even just a base increase to his auto attack speed to lower that awkward transition time of this combo would definitely make that a lot healthier, or maybe even slightly increasing the numbers that you get from using an empowered ability to make it that, sure, you might have some trouble getting multiple empowered abilities off in a team fight, but when you do, they have a bigger impact. Still, I understand his empowered W's synergy with Conqueror might actually end up making these changes a little bit too strong, since he can already stack Conqueror pretty decently in a very short space of time. But even just a little bit of extra AD on top of that passive could make those awkward auto attacks in between your passive procs a little bit more manageable. I cannot count the amount of times I've died or nearly died because I have to balance the idea of trying to decide if me using my Q to get my passive is a good idea or not. Because if I do it, I now have to survive an extra 4 seconds with no damage, or risk trying to get an extra auto attack off against the laner only to die holding my Q in vain. Regardless, these are just suggestions. I'm very interested to hear any way you think might help make his passive more healthy, if at all. Please, at any point during this video, if you want to hop down to the comments section to agree, complain, disagree, whatever you want, I encourage you to do so. But now on to his Q. So, the bread and butter of Pantheon was always his spear, an angry man with a seemingly infinite supply of spears that he was not afraid of Amazon priming into your butt so vigorously that I made an entire video based off the joke that he has an infinite amount of spears, only to realize a day or two later in his rework that when he throws Qs, there is an animation of it actually coming back to him. Not saying that was me, but however. There are a considerable amount of problems with his Q. The AD scaling on it is a lot worse than it used to be. 40% less, in fact. However, given that it is now technically an AoE, this is something that could maybe use maybe like an extra 10% more or so, but honestly, the fact that it's not a single target ability makes me generally okay with most of the position the damage is in now. However, the new mechanic of charging it or tapping it is entirely not favorable for its current form. So to develop on that statement a little bit, his passive is that on his thrown Q, it's essentially the crit execute passive that was on his OD. If they are below a certain amount of health, instead of now critting on your spear and auto attacks, your Q, or your charge Q, is the only thing that is affected by this passive. And even then, you know, it's obviously only when you throw it. In lane though, this is really not an effective way of poking down an enemy, since alongside this charge Q, there's also a 50% damage drop off after the first enemy you hit. So if your lane opponent is hiding behind minions, you're never going to be able to get that longer range poke that Pantheon was kind of really known for. So what this means is that it's very rarely ever worth using your Q when it's not empowered, and even then, it's very rarely ever the optimal play to use other than just using the tap to guarantee that you get the max amount of damage, but this puts you maybe a little bit closer to the enemy than you'd want to be. This has now been patched actually to the point where you're even further encouraged to never use your thrown Q as anything other than the enemy is too far away for me to hit, this is my last chance to kill move, or trying to pick off an enemy from Fog of War when they're overstaying after a team fight. Now, as of 9.17, the passive that only allowed his crit to be on his thrown Q is now being added to the thrust. To me, that sounds a little bit backwards though. I mean, if we wanted this to be in a healthier spot, I'd say that it'd be better to have the crit damage under 25% health only on his thrust, and instead heavily reduce the drop-off damage on him throwing it and removing the passive on his throw. Pantheon is a master of the spear. It makes sense thematically for him to be able to easily hit a vital point on someone's body in close range, but being able to hit that from like 20 foot away with the spear for an execute seems kind of strange for me, but not having it on the thrust. Alongside that as well, the cooldown on his ability is doubled for throwing it, making it just not worth ever using in lane. So in lane, if you throw a Q at an enemy and it hits a minion, then it hits the enemy. In that time, you could get off 2 Qs for full damage in the same time it would take. And also, it would do 4 times the regular damage of that thrown Q. Still, as I said, credit where credit is due. Adding the execute to his thrusted Q is a decent change. And I'll say his wave clear early game has been uplifted pretty heavily. Sure, wave clearing after a few items was never really a major issue for like old Pantheon. But early game, when you don't have the AD and you don't have any points into your Heartseeker Strike, actually pushing back a wave of minions and clearing quickly was not the easiest feat, whereas all you need to do now is have an empowered Q, and then you can basically one-shot a backline of casters. So, Pantheon's W is his stun. Since he's been released, it was revealed that any dash, flash, or blink would actually cancel his stun if they got far enough away. This is his point-and-click stun that previously guaranteed a stun provided the animation went off. Even if you flashed, if Pantheon got the animation off, you were stunned at the end of the flash. This was kind of a big deal to me. With the sheer amount of mobility creep in League of Legends right now, I feel like it's very important to have a champion or a couple of champions that can keep champions that dash around all over the place in check somewhat. Champions like Poppy or like grounded abilities like Miasma from Cassiopeia. When everybody's dashing around, it makes things very difficult. We need a couple of point and click stuns that work. However, Riot have done a good job here. Coming out on the new patch, they are actually changing it so that it will go off regardless of the distance. Big thumbs up on that one. The general consensus on the rest of his W is that it just doesn't scale as well as it used to. The base damage on it isn't as high, and with the weird way that you could dodge his stun now, it just meant that if you were diving onto a team and they flashed, you've just placed yourself 600 units closer to a now very angry enemy team who are likely to slap you around for a bit before moving on to your now outnumbered team. This was always an issue for Pantheon though, like not for people flashing his stun, but his stun was always easily interruptible. Janna Whirlwind, Thresh Flay, Thresh's Q, Gragas Body Slam, Quinn Vault. There's a long list of everything that could stop you in midair and completely cancel out your W altogether. Like the enemy CC would go off on you, and even though they technically touched you, if you tried to W into a Gragas when he was body slamming any direction, you would be like knocked back and stunned. But Gragas would be completely unaffected from you trying to stun him. There was counterplay to this point and click stun. It wasn't really that difficult to stop at all. If you had an enemy Janna playing into you at all, your life was a bit of a cat and mouse game of trying to get her to bait out her whirlwind or trying to get her to bait out her ultimate so you could actually get onto a team reliably. You had to like wait for them to use abilities that you knew would very easily cancel your W before actually deciding to engage. So not only does that make this a bit of a higher skill ceiling for Pantheon players with their decision making, but also it doesn't just feel like a really cheap stun that can get off anywhere. There are ways to counter it, and it's really not that hard, and lots of champions can stop it. So it wasn't completely unfair for the enemy team to deal with either. But now with half the champion pool in League of Legends, being able to dash far enough away or jump far enough away or blink or whatever, far enough away from Pantheon that his stun doesn't even go off to begin with, that was a problem, but it's been fixed. A big change has come though, and they are fixing it, so respect to Riot for realizing it. There was also this weird thing before where you could hold the empowered W and use it on a different enemy that I think has been removed, and you're forced to use it on the person you stun now. But honestly, I don't really understand the consequences of holding that ability and using it on someone else to begin with though, so didn't really bother me whether you could do that or not. So I'd say buffing the damage a little bit on his W, or straight up giving him a little bit of AD scaling on it and not just AP would make a pretty big difference, considering we're moving on to his E now. Now, his E has been given some mixed reviews. Some people think it's super duper overpowered because it can block tower shots, even though Pantheon could do that anyway. Some people think it's useless, and I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on this one. I think it's cool that his old passive has been given some skill expression. Many times I've survived near death from towers by juggling Aegis stacks on old Pantheon to stop myself getting bodied. But the damage on this ability, when you compare it to his old E, is just... it's just something else. I understand that it's not meant to be used in an offensive manner. You should not be using this ability really to do damage, but considering the massive amount of damage that has been taken out of his old E, I think this ability is where a lot of the problems people are finding with Pantheon actually stem from. His E does as much damage as one auto attack in 1.5 seconds, provided that you hit them from start to finish with all the jabs. Then that's before the slam, which does a decent amount extra. This deals a lot of reduced damage to minions. It is massively lowered, making Pantheon's jungle, it's just laborious. Seriously, I really enjoyed playing old Pantheon's jungle because it was a pretty healthy clear, but now it's just really kind of rough. Whilst you do get skill expression from his E, it comes at the weighty price of a 22-second cooldown at level 1, meaning the jungle is going to body you from start to finish. My main concern with this is that arguably Pantheon's E previously was his teamfight ability, an AoE with a 300% AD ratio on it that had under half the ability cooldown as his new shield at level 1. It was a massive outputter of damage, but in removing it to replace it with what is essentially just his old passive, but it does only a single auto attack of damage and then a little burst at the end, they haven't really compensated for this removal of damage anywhere else on his kit. In fact, they've taken the damage out of his E, and then they've proceeded to hoard the damage on every other part of his kit altogether. So his Q AD scaling is lowered, he's got lower flat base damage. Hell, they even lowered the AP ratio on his ulti, if that was your flavor, before patching it back up to fix it to 100% later on. The only real thing that has been added to compensate for the damage is his Mortal Will Empowerment, which we've already kind of been over, and it's a little bit awkward to work with at the best of times. As a further point about his E, to me, the slow on it, usually it seems a little bit unnecessary. I understand that it may throw balance off somewhat if Pantheon is able to move at full speed whilst walking backwards and blocking damage from a single direction. But in a game where so many champions can dash and blink behind you, there's champions that their entire move is to jump behind you, like Katarina, she can Shumpo behind you. It seems very difficult to really do much in teamfights when I'm trying to back away from enemies, when if I use my E and walk backwards, I'm slowing myself by 50% only to allow the enemy team to dash and dive or just straight up walk behind me in some cases to damage me anyway. Now I reckon the AD ratio needs to go up on this ability a little bit. If you are running towards a Pantheon, he puts his shield up, you should be punished in some fashion for standing directly in front of it and allowing him to jab you 100 times. It's like Brand ulti. If you get ultied by a Brand and you stand next to your 3 teammates, it's not the Brand's fault for him doing a lot of damage. It's your team's fault for standing all clumped up together, you know what I mean? I feel like because this ability can block tower shots, people feel that it doesn't need damage on it, but old Pantheon had that before, and his win rate wasn't really that amazing for what he did. Old Pantheon could very easily juggle just as many tower shots as an empowered E from Pantheon did, but that was his passive before, and his E did lots of damage anyway, so I don't know. But anyway, finally, his ultimate. Now, whilst this ability looks amazing, and just everything about it is a spectacle, like the initial jump, the sound effects on it when you hit the ground and when you're going up, the diving in it is great, it feels a little bit underwhelming when you actually hit an enemy. The damage drop-off points on it are a little bit unclear because instead of it being a circle where you can say, this is the center, this is where it will do the big damage, and I can estimate based on the enemy's distance from the shadow of my character in the middle of the circle on the ground what kind of damage it will do. It's actually in fact this weird oblong shape where it seems a little bit unclear to me where I actually do damage. Does it count as being damage in the center if they are standing in the middle of the line that I sweep through, or is it only on top of my spear that it does center damage? And how far does the center damage line extend to, and where do we start dropping off, and where, you know, where is the cutoff point for getting the most amounts of damage to the least amounts out of this? I understand that his old ultimate also did not have these lines to show where the damage drop off was, but that being said, it was a circle. You could generally logically figure out where it would be, whereas with an oblong rectangular rounded kind of thing, it's a bit of an awkward shape to give clarity to players. Though testing it, it does appear that as long as it's in the center line as you dive in, it will do a decent amount of damage, but it does max out on top of the spear. But as far as I know, everything else is a bit of a mystery where the cutoff points are, so use whatever. However, what's clarifying is a big part of things for a player to know about their own damage output. It is as important for your team to know your damage outputs, and by that I mean, your team should be told before you land where you're going to land. As it is now, Pantheon's ultimate's AoE marks on the ground appear to the enemy team at the same time as your own team, or hell, they appear at the same time for the enemy team as the Pantheon player who put them there, rather than the 2 seconds before on his old ultimate where your entire team would be alerted with markings on the ground where you would land exactly, and then it would change color to show that you've committed to that ultimate and you're going to be landing there in 2 seconds. Considering the fact that Pantheon now cannot even cancel his ultimate like he used to before, where before you could ulti, you could cancel it, your team would engage without you because they didn't realize you thought that ulti was a bad idea, putting it on cooldown for 30 seconds and having your entire team dead because you baited them. Now, you cannot cancel it even if the circumstances have changed in the 2 seconds since you started casting it. Your team don't exactly know where it's going to land until it's literally coming in, and it takes half a second extra to land to begin with than it did on his old ultimate. Also, being dropped in a way that you cannot buffer a stun immediately like you used to. So before, you could ultimate in, immediately stun the second you land and follow up with a combo, but now you slowly slide in from potentially a suboptimal direction because of your positioning. You have this weird second of being unable to do anything, dealing less damage than you expect potentially, and the enemy team have just as much of a heads up that you're coming as your team do. Old Pantheon ultimate was simple, but it was great. You knew exactly where you were going to be getting yourself. I consider myself pretty great at positioning them to know where I could go, where I wanted to be, and where the enemy would not like me to be for the most part. But I can safely say that with the new Pantheon ultimate, despite the actual genuine damage increase on it, which I can avoid, it does more damage, I have not really hit very many good ultimates that have changed up a team fight. For me, it's almost just like a glorified TP to let the enemy know, oh hey, I'm here too now, by the way. So that's it. That's all the issues I have for Pantheon. I know this was probably a really negative sounding video, but I love him. And so did the Pantheon mains community who helped me compile all of these opinions. This is not just the opinion of one person, but many others. They very graciously allowed me to be a bit of a megaphone for their concerns. And if you are a Pantheon main, I will link the Reddit community down below to discuss either this video or your own thoughts on Pantheon and where he is with other people who enjoy playing that character. There's been plenty of discussion on there about how he is, how to fix him, and in general, just memes, but you know. I hope I did the Pantheon mains community justice. This was a far bigger undertaking than I could have ever experienced, trying to make everything make sense, and I'm sorry to them that it took over 2 weeks to boil everything down to the nuts and bolts of the problem, but there was no way and I could not allow myself to come out with this video without trying to get everything right, or as right as I possibly could, and I know for a fact I probably just made it sound terrible anyway, and it's probably a gibberish level mess, and it's probably not structured well, but I tried. Back to the terrible meme content tomorrow. Whilst this channel is all about having fun, I love Pantheon and I want to have fun playing him for as many years as I have been playing him already. I thank you so much. This video is very long and it's also a lot of information to throw at your eyeballs. So I assume you're very offended at me. What is this? We're not here to learn, clearly. But God bless you for watching anyway. If somebody's linked you this and you're a Pantheon player, feel free to subscribe. Anybody, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And my loyal viewers of the sock drawer, drop this video a like, because I think you can hear from the tone of my voice, I'm done with this video. I am so mentally exhausted from all of this writing. It's been like 4,000 words. It's 25 minutes. This video was 25 minutes. I'm sorry. I need to go lie down. Have a great one. Riot. You gotta give me credit for this one. I really tried. Just give him a couple fix-ups. We'll be good. I love Pantheon. Make it happen. Have a good one.